All right, so do you remember the last time that you felt guilty? What's up, students? I'm David, and if you're anything like me, when you feel guilty, you probably get really good at hiding. Maybe you've experienced this before. You start hiding from your parents, from your friends, your group leader, or from church. And we do everything we can to act as though nothing happened, even though on the inside we know that what we did was wrong and it's eating us up. Not only do we do this with other people, we also do this with God. And we know that God knows what we've done wrong, so we back away from our relationship with Him. Or if we didn't have a relationship with Him to begin with, we try to just push Him further and further away. We hide from God and we hide from others because we assume that they can never love or forgive us because of what we've done. But as you're going to hear today, when it comes to God, that couldn't be further from the truth. He loves you and He wants a relationship with you in spite of all your sins, all the things that you feel guilty about. You matter to Him, no matter what you've done, no matter what's in your past. You matter so much to Him. Unfortunately, we all tend to let our guilt get in the way of our faith. And we'll stop showing up to church or groups because we feel guilty. And I want you to know that your group leader understands this, and so do I. I've been there before. I mean, for a time in high school, I stopped going to groups and even stopped attending Cedar Creek altogether because I felt guilty. I felt guilty about the things I'd done, and I didn't think other people at the church would love and accept me if they found out. And I was just kind of embarrassed to go be around all of them. And because of what I'd done, I really wasn't sure if God could love me either. Thankfully, as I've come to find out, that couldn't be further from the truth. He still loves me and He still loves you. Thankfully, we're not the first people to have these kind of experiences with guilt. The Bible provides plenty of examples that we can learn from, and we're going to talk about one of those examples today. For the past few weeks, as a part of the Easter season, we've been in this series called Afterlife. We've looked at people who physically saw Jesus after the resurrection and how they changed as a result. See, if you or I were to see a friend who died and is now walking around fully alive, it would change us in a big way too. For many people, their lives were radically different after they saw a resurrected Jesus. Their life after, or afterlife, was dramatically changed, and that includes a guy named Peter. Peter was one of Jesus' 3 closest friends, and he was a key leader during the early days of the Jesus movement. But Peter had some run-ins with guilt and shame, just like we do sometimes. He was known as being Jesus' loud friend, which we all have, or maybe you are the loud friend. And this got Peter in trouble from time to time. He just couldn't keep his mouth shut. And the worst example of this happened when Jesus was sentenced to die on a cross. So Jesus was arrested, and Peter literally cut off a guy's ear to defend Jesus. It's not a recommended strategy to prove your loyalty to your best friend, but hey, at least he was there for Jesus in his moments of great need, right? But then, a few hours later, when Jesus was on trial, Peter stood nearby and he lied 3 separate times about his connection to Jesus. He denied even knowing the guy. Even worse, before any of this happened, Jesus told Peter that he would do exactly that he would deny being connected to Jesus 3 times. He basically told Peter that I've experienced your loyalty so far, but when it comes down to it in the end, you won't be loyal to me. Peter defends himself, assuring Jesus that he would never do that. And then, at Jesus' lowest moment, that's exactly what Peter did. Jesus was arrested, he was tried and nailed to a Roman cross, and the last thing Peter did before Jesus died was deny that he even knew Jesus 3 times. I mean, I almost feel guilty for him. What a brutal end to this story, right? But like we've talked about in the series, Jesus' death wasn't the end of the story. No, see, Easter Sunday happened, right? The tomb is empty and Jesus is alive. The whole direction of the story changes, which is awesome. But Peter probably had some mixed feelings. He probably thought, I'm so glad Jesus is back, but does that mean I have to face him after what I did to him? I mean, I messed up pretty bad. Can he really love me? To Peter, it's possible that the resurrection was initially a reminder of the guilt he felt. And if he felt guilt, I sometimes wonder if he ran through all the same phases of guilt that we do. I wonder if he wanted to lie, exaggerate, and defend himself, or even hide from Jesus altogether. A few days after Jesus' resurrection, he was on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and Peter was in a boat with the other disciples, his best buddies, and he saw Jesus. They went to the shore, Jesus made breakfast, and he brought up the one thing that was no doubt weighing on Peter's mind. So here's what happens. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, Peter said. You know that I love you. And then Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The 3rd time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus had asked him 3 times already, do you love me? And he said again, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Peter denied knowing Jesus 3 times. And then Jesus asked Peter, do you love me 3 times? In other words, for every time that Peter denied knowing Jesus, Jesus gives Peter another chance. And in giving him a chance, Peter knows he is loved and forgiven. Jesus wants Peter to know that he has a second chance, and he even tells Peter that he wants him to continue to lead, which is why he said, "Feed my sheep," or "Lead my people," right? This exchange is so interesting. Jesus asked Peter if he still loves him. As humiliating and terrible as it was for Peter to deny Jesus, here was a chance to make everything right. Even though Peter may have given up on himself, Jesus hadn't given up on him. Peter could have given into his guilt, and he could have gone into hiding. But that isn't what Jesus wanted for Peter, and Jesus didn't want Peter's life to be defined by guilt. He wanted Peter to experience grace. Peter knew that Jesus had been killed, and he saw Jesus after he came back to life. This proved to Peter that Jesus was capable of offering him the grace that he needed to forgive himself. The resurrection showed Peter the power Jesus had, and Peter's encounter with Jesus on the beach showed that Jesus chose to offer him powerful grace. The resurrection proved that guilt didn't have to destroy Peter's faith. Instead, grace could destroy his guilt and fuel his faith. Because of grace, Peter was no longer controlled by his guilt. Because of grace, Peter accepted the love Jesus offered him. Because of grace, Peter traveled around the world preaching about the same grace that changed his life. And because of the resurrection, Peter knew he was forgiven, and you can too. I don't know what's been causing you to feel guilt, but chances are that from the moment I mention guilt, you've had something on your mind. No matter what it is that you feel guilty about, I want you to know, I want you to remember this, that guilt is no match for God's grace and forgiveness. The most beautiful thing about God's grace and forgiveness is that He gives it to us freely. We don't have to do anything to earn or deserve it, and truthfully, we never could anyways. Peter didn't deserve Jesus' forgiveness, and neither do you and I, but He offers it to us anyways. All you have to do to enter into God's grace and begin to live a life free of guilt is to accept and receive Jesus into your life. It's when we confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord, and when we believe in our hearts that He rose from the dead, that we are saved and we can begin a life-changing, adventurous relationship with Him. Today, whether you need to accept God's grace for the first time, whether you need to receive His forgiveness for the first time, or you just need a reminder of it in your life, I encourage you, talk to your group leader about what next step you need to take in your spiritual journey. And if your next step is to accept Jesus into your life, your group leader would love to have that conversation with you and celebrate you as you make the most important decision of your life. And I know all of our staff, all of our team is going to be celebrating with you as well. You know, talking about God's grace is one thing, but experiencing it is something else entirely. And that's why we have small groups. We want you to have a safe place to be reminded of that grace when your guilt feels too heavy. Group is the safest place for you to talk through the guilt you face and experience God's grace alongside your friends and your group leaders. Your group leaders have gone through training on how to handle some pretty tough conversations. And they have people in their life that they can get real with about their guilt as well. They have encountered grace, and they will pass on that same grace to you. Why? Because that's what the resurrected Jesus demonstrated in Peter's life. And that's why Peter's afterlife, his life after Jesus' resurrection, was so powerful. Because of the resurrection, Peter realized that grace is greater than guilt. And this Easter, because of the resurrection, you can experience Jesus' guilt-shattering grace in your life as well.